audience, thank you for joining us today. Thanks we are recording this session, so please be aware of that, and we did make that quite clear in the instructions for signing up. I want to remind you of that, but also very keen for this to be a dynamic and interactive session. So those of you that are watching, that are taking part, and as more people join through, please do take part by putting comments or questions in the chat. Try not to have a full-on conversation in the chat if you can, because it does get a little bit distracting. We want it to encompass everybody. So thank you again for just following that simple rule. And before I come to the wonderful two people that are here and not yet speaking, whereas I'm rambling, I'm Rachel Clamp. I am a member of the leadership team for Women Defence UK, and I am also run the comms strand of the Women Defence Charter. We have put this in place, as you will have seen from the emails and LinkedIn messages we've sent. Instead of doing the Farnborough, where it can be quite a limited audience, and I've driven past the queue of traffic to get in today, so it's going to be a bit crazy. We are here to be able to reach a wider audience and create something that we can use multiple times. This is session number 1. We have another session taking place tomorrow that is starting to look at talent. So if you are interested in taking part in that session, you haven't registered for it, please just drop us an email, because I think we've actually closed the registration. So moving on to today's topics. If you spent any time around defence over the past couple of years, you'll have noticed the one word appearing almost everywhere is readiness. Speeches, policy documents, it's even Luke Pollard's title, in Luke Pollard's title. That is assuming I haven't checked if he's still in his post at 10:05. Who knows? The term is everywhere. But what does readiness actually mean? For a lot of people, we naturally, our minds immediately go to ships, aircraft, equipment, stockpiles of technology. And of course, that is important, but not absolutely essential. But none of that is any good and doesn't deliver capability on its own. It needs people. And that's about whether you have the right skills, the right experience, and the right leadership to be able to respond, and whether we can attract the talent, develop that talent, and then obviously retain it in what is an incredibly competitive labour market. Because that's the reality, that defence doesn't simply compete with itself for talent, it's competing with every other sector for engineers, cyber specialists, scientists, project managers, HR experts, digital experts, future leaders. We are not in a bubble. As the strategic environment becomes more uncertain and technology evolves more quickly than ever, it's important that people's capability only increase. And that's why today really matters. Over the next 50-odd minutes, we are going to explore what workforce readiness really means, where the challenges lie, how organisations are responding, and what practical actions we can maybe all take to strengthen the capability across the defence enterprise. And quite very importantly, why this isn't just a conversation about recruitment or HR. It is about defence capability, because ultimately, readiness starts with people. So with that in mind, I want to welcome both Wendy Rothery and Catherine Seeley to the conversation. I'm going to come to them in a moment with our opening question. Wendy has spent her career in the Ministry of Defence, but has recently moved into the private sector, as you can see by her lovely background, and is an HR expert, I believe, Wendy, at Turner Townsend. Catherine Seeley, I should say Wendy is also a member of the leadership team for Women Defence UK. Catherine Seeley is co-chair of the Women Defence Charter, and Catherine, having spent her career in defence primes, has recently, in the last 9 months, moved to Thales, where she has a nice shiny new job. I cannot remember the job title, but she's been around for a long time and is also a significant leader in the defence enterprise. So both of you, welcome and thank you. I'm going to start with the question. So what does readiness mean to you? And Catherine, let's start with you first.
Hey, no, thanks, Rachel, and good morning, everybody. So for me, I'm as Rachel, as you just said, I've very recently just started a new role. So I run Thales's services business worldwide for all of its underwater systems capability. As you can imagine, in the current climate, there is a lot of need for us to now be moving at pace in that space. Our customers are needing us to support them wherever they need them, whenever they need that support. And so for us, readiness is really shifting. And I think when I've spoken to peers across industry in recent months, I'm seeing that same message being repeated right the way across the board. Pace is increasing, demand is increasing, and the opportunity and to make mistakes is lessening. If anything, we need to be ready to get the job done and get it done right first time. So for me, that means having teams of people who are truly ready. They are poised to be mobilized. They are trained, and they have a good plan, and critically, and I think one of the things that I'm quite keen that we explore this morning, they are ready to be resilient, and we've helped them prepare to be resilient. That for me is becoming critical. And so as we move through the conversation today, I'm hoping that's a topic that we can explore in a bit more depth.
Cool. Thank you, Catherine. Wendy, what does defence readiness and readiness mean to you?
Thanks very much, Rachel, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here and to be part of the Women in Defence organisation. Oh, thank you. So defence readiness. I spent more than 30 years in the Royal Air Force, so the majority of my career has been in the military. So instinctively, when I hear defence readiness, I think about the armed forces and ensuring that they have the skills, the experience, the resources, the equipment they need to succeed wherever they are, both at home in the UK and overseas when they're deployed. But taking that broader into the defence enterprise and into industry, people capability is the golden thread that underpins our national security. So modern warfare relies, of course, on advanced technology, but that technology is no use without the skilled personnel to operate, maintain it, and to optimize it. So a highly capable workforce turns the kit and equipment into strategic advantage that delivers that operational capability. And I think that's, the defence sector is an enterprise. We're not just talking about military, we're talking about industry, we're talking about the agencies, and we all come together to deliver that operational capability that underpins our national security, and people are right at the heart of that. So for me, when we're ready, as Catherine said, people have the skills and the experience and the tools to do their job and to succeed, and that's absolutely critical to our national security.
Great. Thank you both. Some interesting bits and pieces that you were both highlighting there, and we will come down to, I think, resilience quite significant later, Catherine. But one of the things I want to pick up on both is we talked about the moving at pace, the increase in pace, and the increase in demand. Are people feeling, maybe this is where we're going to move straight into the resilience, are people feeling ready for that? Are we actually seeing it or feeling it, or is it just the narrative that we're hearing? And are people saying, I am ready, send me the project, I'll get on with it? Is there a perception gap potentially around some of these things? Either one, jump in.
Like me to jump in with that one. So I think certainly, and in my role as industry co-chair, I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of our members really across the Women in Defence Charter in recent times. I think people truly are feeling that pressure starting to mount as pace is increasing. There is a lot of rhetoric now, which I think is necessary in the press and in the media around the need for defence capability to be ready. And that pressure and the reality, I think, of the increasing threat that our nation and its allies are facing, it is bringing home the need to be able to move quickly and to be able to move rapidly. We are seeing, certainly on the industrial side, we are seeing requirements increasing. We're seeing volumes for platforms, for example, for new build platforms increasing. We're seeing throughput through the system starting to truly ramp up. And I think critically, we're also seeing perhaps sometimes older equipment being needed to be deployed for the first time in many years. And so that is also testing the system all the way through, right the way through the full ecosystem, right the way down to spare parts providers, to equipment that sits within factories. Is it up to scratch and is it ready to operate? All of those tasks are putting strain on a system that hasn't been operating in that cadence for a long time. And so what we are seeing, I think, is people starting to demonstrate signs of that pressure. And I think it's critical for all of us who sit within leadership roles and within roles where we are potentially controlling projects to be considering how we can best help our teams cope with that environment.
And I'd add to that, Rachel, if we think about what is a ready workforce, it's a workforce that's agile, adaptable, continually learning, technologically capable, embracing new tools. But some of the risks that Catherine touched on there, the impact of burnout, not keeping pace with the rapid adoption of AI, for example, digital skills gaps. And as we transition deeper into automation, I think human capital risks evolve from that simple talent acquisition into deeper structural operational hazards. So I think we're seeing that shift into and as Catherine mentioned, aging infrastructure, but there are also different types of threats, cyber threats that we're needing to respond to, supply chain operational pressure again that Catherine touched on. So the specialist skills that we need and the resilience that we need to overcome all of that and to move at pace, it's a challenge. It's about incentivizing the talent to come into the defence sector and giving people the skills and the experience to succeed. But the resilience is absolutely key as well to keep pace with that change in technology and the change in threat.
Okay. So if we move forward onto that piece about attracting people, because obviously that is going to be key. I don't want to tread on tomorrow's toes too much. There's going to be a lot on attraction tomorrow. But one thing I do want to talk, we've just talked about, unfortunately it sounded quite negative the way we're starting this, but we have to identify the problem. But is there, if we can just quite briefly talk about, do we have a recruitment problem or do we have an attraction problem? Is there a misunderstanding about all these amazing things we've just talked about, all these different new jobs? Is there a gap in what people realise defence could be or is? Lots of smiles. I'm loving this. Either one of you just jump in. It's so good.
So recruitment is one of my passions. I was head of RAF recruitment several years ago, which was one of the best jobs. It was fantastic. I think it's a bit of both. I think there is an issue with attracting youngsters into defence. I don't think that's necessarily new. But the millennial demographic has demonstrated a shift away from that traditional national pride in national security and the motivation to be part of that sense of duty that underpins not just the armed forces but the broader defence sector. So there's a nice statistic that only 28% of the British public would support national service, voluntary national service, and the younger generation is the most opposed. I think there's also a level of mystique around what's involved in defence. Particularly with the armed forces, that sort of behind the fence and what's involved in the mission, and it can be difficult to talk about how we actually operate for some of the roles, not all of them. And then we've talked about STEM and the need to attract cutting edge engineers, cloud architects, cybersecurity specialists. So those are some of the challenges that we need to address for attract. In terms of recruitment, I think that there is a little bit of misperception. Again, I don't think that's new. It existed when I joined the Royal Air Force many years ago, that what I thought the role would be turned out to be actually very different. And in a really positive way for me, I have to say. But I think there's still, the misperceptions, the myths around what it's like to serve in the armed forces, and can you go home at weekends? Almost yes, you can. And we have struggled to convert those applications into boots on the ground, as we say. So some of the challenges with fitness, medical, security clearances. We are getting much better at that, and the new recruiting contract that we have for the armed forces will address some of that. So I think it's a bit of both, a bit of attract and recruitment challenges.
Before we come to Catherine, something I want to throw in there as well. I loved your description, just Wendy, about when you started. It was completely different to what you expected. Isn't every single job like that? Whatever sector you go into, whichever job you go into, whatever you see on paper, it's different when you get into the team, when you bring yourself into it and you see what you like and how that evolves. I think that's an overall challenge around every recruitment and attraction. But when we've got all those other things you talked about with defence, it makes the idea that I think there's more of an expectation to it be exactly as it is on paper.
Yeah.
Catherine.
Yes,
what are your thoughts?
No, definitely. A lot of what Wendy was just articulating resonates with what we see, certainly on my side as well. I think what is interesting is we are finding increasingly a need, I think, for anybody coming into the sector, exactly Wendy, you were saying, to recognise how their role ultimately supports national security and to find a degree of motivation in that. That is critical. We're finding in the recruitment process, it's critical to check that sort of sense of mission and purpose really means something to an individual, because we're finding that people recruited with that sense of drive and purpose typically are more likely to stay within the roles and once they join. I think the other aspect that I was reflecting on was we need to get better at, assuming we fix the recruitment problem, which certainly is not an easy one, but I think we are making good progress towards finding the right ways to bring people into the sector. I think one of the challenges that we have when we come back to that question about pace and need to mobilise quickly is I think a number of organisations have lost the ability to teach individuals joining the organisation. I think COVID and that period where working approach changed so significantly really did put a bit of a barrier in place to established ways of learning a role, and organisations are gradually coming through that. We've clearly been back and operational for a good couple of years now. That sense of learning and the ability for new joiners, whatever the level they are, to access a company or an organisation and really get the sense for how best to operate and how to be able to best do their role, I think has shifted a little bit, and it's an area that we do need to pay attention to.
Yeah, and there is that whole the typical social contract that we used to have of how we worked, where we worked, when we worked. Yeah. I think that we did a massive elastic band, didn't we, during COVID? That obviously there are many jobs and in defence where you can't work from home, or you can't work split shift or something like that. There's different things, but that's not to say we can't actually look at some of the be more open and be better as employers and leaders to getting the best from people to enable them to be readiness, and for everything we've talked about the burnout and the resilience. It's starting to look at at the people maybe in a different way, the same as we do as our platforms evolve and as our warfare evolves. The people need to be evolving to be able to maintain some of that readiness in that as well. Which sort of, so what barriers do we think there are? As somebody's just put in the chat, Louisa just put in the chat here, there's this one size doesn't fit all is a huge challenge for recruitment. But so what barriers do we think do exist to be able to bring some of those people through, some of those readiness elements available? And one of the we have Jasmine's on the as put in the chat, returners are often overlooked as a pool, as a talent pool. I'd be interested, Wendy, from your experience, what do you think about the challenges for the different pools for the returners? Is that something that maybe employers need to start looking at slightly differently?
For lateral recruitment, do you mean?
Well, just in general, lateral returners, lateral recruitment, but also, yes, returners that are people that have been out, whether it's been because they've for maternity, caring, their own ill health, whatever challenges. Is that an audience we could be looking at more?
I think, well, yes, is the answer to that. And I've got good personal experience of recruiting people back into the Royal Air Force, having having had time out to pursue a different type of career in industry, perhaps, or as you said, maternity, or somebody accompanying their partner overseas and having a bit of sabbatical for a few years. And that's a win-win for both them and for defence, because it's it's using the skills that they have, whether it's life experience, whether it's having been out in industry and learned new skills. I think there are some broader barriers to recruitment that we need to address, whether it's structural, cultural, some of the bureaucracy. There's a lot of myths out there, as I touched on earlier, about what it's like working in defence. Is it all lethal weapons? No. Are you constantly going to be deployed away from home? No. That's easy to fix just by having open and transparent conversations about the types of roles that that you can perform in the defence sector, not just talking about the armed forces. But I think there are barriers that exist for certain groups, and here we are as women in defence talking about this. I think for women, certainly when we're looking at the armed forces, the regular armed forces, less than 15% are women. In certain areas, we're up to more than 20%. So Royal Air Force officers, for example. But part of that is the perceptions about what it's like to serve in the armed forces, and some of that can be addressed through breaking down some of those perceptions. I think for other groups, underrepresented groups such as ethnic minorities, for example, and even just the younger generation, as I said, those sort of the ethical considerations about what it's like to serve in defence, and that's not just the armed forces. That some youngsters will avoid coming into defence because they have a moral unease about lethal technologies. So that's an interesting one to try and address. Again, you don't need to be working with those technologies, but it's what the industry stands for, I suppose. So addressing that, so this is part of your national security. It's a key part of UK government. But not everybody would see it in the same way, and so it's having that broader conversation. I suppose years ago, concerns about joining the tobacco industry, for example, you can see it in the same way. So it's having the conversation, shining a light on all the roles that you can get involved with right across defence, and some of the most rewarding careers that you can have.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and who runs a marketing communications agency, and I was surprised that she said some of their team, how selective they're being on which campaigns they're working on, even quite early in their career, and they're actually having to do more deep dives in and briefings with the team as to what they're working on, what the organisations are, and breaking down some of their myths. So yeah, Catherine, what are your thoughts on this different groups and areas?
So I guess just to reflect back almost on all of those points, I think definitely that perception piece is critical. I remember joining as a graduate trainee. I got my first role as a graduate trainee within a defence organisation, and I remember vividly some of my fellow graduates and housemates commenting that I was joining the arms industry effectively. That perception, I think, does still pervade. We are seeing, I think, improved coverage of the need for the defence sector and the real threats facing us. I think yesterday's events just south of Plymouth bring that very much clearly to light. And I think public discourse has improved on that matter, but there is still a way to go. I think in terms of how we therefore access some of those groups and returners, I think we're a really fantastic group to talk about as our veterans. They are a critical, they definitely are a critical set of groups for us to be targeting for recruitment into the industry. They typically understand the industry well. And in the case of STEM returners, for example, even if they've not worked in defence, they've applied some of those critical skills to similar problems elsewhere, and therefore are able to naturally help organisations more rapidly adopt potentially new technology. So they're both critical groups. I think when I reflect back, that there is again a considerable amount of effort, I think, happening across the defence ecosystem to help those individuals transition into roles. I think there's definitely more that organisations can do, though, to recognise the potential barriers and to help individuals tackle any concerns they have about re-entering the workforce or entering a different type of workforce. And so I think certainly when we think about activities that we should be taking either within the armed forces or within industry, they definitely are groups we should be focusing in on.
Thank you. So if we start to look at some of these groups now and inclusion as a capability issue, we talked, Wendy, you came at you said they're bringing a strategic advantage to deliver operational capability. That's what readiness is. That's what we need to be looking at. It'd be great to understand from both of you. How do you think inclusion and diversity actually does improve that operational effectiveness?
My last job in the Ministry of Defence before I left the Royal Air Force was as head of diversity and inclusion for MOD. So I have good personal experience of this as well as recruitment. Rachel, you're asking all the right questions, which is great. So it is a strategic enabler for the armed forces and the defence industry more broadly, a strategic enabler of our operational capability. So we, as we've spoken about earlier, we can't rely on our equipment, our technology. Our ultimate edge and our strategic advantage comes from the cognitive capability and resilience of our people. So it's not about hitting targets, and we don't talk about targets anyway. We talk about levels of ambition because we recognise that by broadening our appeal to, and again, this is not just the armed forces, I'm talking about the defence sector here, by broadening our appeal to a bigger pool of people, then that's how you access the talent. And with that comes different cognitive ability. So people think differently. So that takes us away from the groupthink that the Chilcot inquiry spoke about. It gives us our operational and decision-making edge. It makes us more adaptable, more flexible, and more capable, because we, bringing different thinking together at any level of the organisation, whichever organisation you're working in. This is not just about defence. It makes you stronger, more effective, and for defence, that's where our operational capability that underpins our national security comes from. So it's absolutely vital. It's not about better representing the national demographic. It's not about doing the right thing morally. Those things are, of course, important, but ultimately it's about getting the best talent that enables you to be the most successful and to outpace your adversaries. You can tell I'm pretty passionate about this.
Beautiful answer, Catherine.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think any dynamic that allows us to break through groupthink, allows us to avoid missing a different solution or an alternative path that could allow us a strategic advantage, is critical. So that is definitely, from my perspective, why diversity and inclusion within our teams is so important. I've seen countless examples of junior recruits being able to offer different ways forward, which have actually been the most successful, which without the right environment would have been ignored. Equally, neurodiverse community who can bring fantastic systems thinking, which is so critical to us getting a whole enterprise approach solution that is successful first time round. We really do need to nurture the specialist skills and talents that we have right the way across our population, and we do need to be welcoming those skills into our sector, such that we're able to keep doing the work that we need to do.
So I'm now going to ask a question that was in the briefing paper, but you probably looked at it and thought, I really hope she doesn't ask that, because ultimately it's like this will fix everything. And this is the how do we keep the inclusion connected to capability rather than treating them as separate agendas? Now, obviously, this is the ultimate if you can fix that. But the reason, listening to both of you, obviously can't disagree with anything you've said. Everything you're saying is spot on. And to both of your points, this isn't just for defence. It's a challenge everywhere. We should be seeing this everywhere. But when we do hear people saying, well, we fixed the gender problem, it's done. Women are everywhere. And then you go into a room and suddenly you're seeing again that the immediate reaction, people go to their first network and it's, well, I didn't do it on purpose. It's just because we fixed the gender issue. Women are everywhere. So they just happen. There's just none in this room. That's okay. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's going to take longer and more thought. And it's not that should be a separate thought. It should be an embedded thought. Don't know what you think about that, because like I say, if we can fix this bit, we'll solve the whole problem.
No, I completely agree with you. I think for me, the more I've thought around this, the more it becomes part of our strategic resource and planning fundamentally. We shouldn't be treating inclusion as a sort of HR tick box exercise, which is certainly not the case. There are many organisations who are really authentically addressing inclusion and embedding it into their ways of working. So certainly my statement is not a sweeping everybody is missing the boat on this, but there are also clearly examples where an HR policy is being implemented entirely separately from key strategic succession planning discussions, for example. And I think how we knit those things together such that we're always considering what types of skills do we need in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time? Where are the sources for those skills? How could we think differently about that? And really challenging ourselves rather than to your point, sustaining the demographic or the approach that we've always taken. I think the more that we can do that, the more that we will see this really starting to gain some traction. I fear that without making this really putting the effort to do that, and it is a leadership task to do that, we won't really see the pace of traction for many years, and I don't think we have many years to fix the problem.
And I would add to that, Rachel. I'd say we need to frame inclusion as cognitive capability. You know, it's not about doing the right thing, it's about accessing the talent, embedding our DE&I metrics into our operating model. So instead of treating it as a standalone strategy, embed it into the primary benchmarks that we're using to evaluate our performance. Tying it into the digital and cyber tech pipeline. You heard Catherine talk there about neurodiverse people and how successful they can be within that space. And you know, adopting a whole of society resilience model. I think our current strategy focuses on building that national resilience through a whole of society approach. So rather than it's tapping into everybody, into where the talent exists, and optimizing our operating capability through our people.
I just want to highlight one of the comments that we have in the chat, and completely right. And it's something that always in my mind, when we talk about returners and diversity, there is also an aging population element, which there very much is. And I think that plays right back to the conversation we had at the start, though. Essential, passing down the skills, teaching the next level of leaders, the next people that are going to be keeping us safe. But there is also that burnout element. I think that's what we need to. Let's face it, there's a lot of people, I should imagine, that have been working tirelessly, been saying for years, I need people to come and help me with this. We're driving forwards. The deadline's here, more with less. And they've got to the point where they've received their pension statement and they thought, you know what? That's it. I've had enough now. And I do remember, to share my age, so other people hopefully remember this. When I first started my career, you got your handbook, and it told you about how your retirement was going to be at this point, and you had the option for 3 months before going down to 4 days, so you could get used to not working, and 2 days. But the business didn't ever think, actually, we need to start to look at this notice period. They suddenly realized, oh yeah, that's not their working day, and then they were gone. We don't look at retirement or things and the aging population in that same way anymore. The skills that can be brought in, and we can be completely utilizing, again, some of the things we've said in a different way. Why not embrace that expert for a couple of days a week?
So I had a great example when I was running RAF recruiting and selection a few years ago. I was having a chance conversation with a former RAF colleague at the time. She was 52. She'd been an engineer in the RAF. She'd left to pursue a second career in industry. Life had taken a slightly different turn, and she'd said something about, as a bit of a joke, rejoining the Royal Air Force. And I said, absolutely, you're an engineer, you're incredibly capable, and you're fit and active. She'd kept really fit over time, which is important as well in terms of, the physical fitness side. And she said, yeah, but I'm a different stage of my life. I wouldn't, necessarily want to deploy. It wouldn't rule it out, but, where would I be working? I'd want some sort of not guarantee exactly, but I'd want to know what the job would be and where I'd be based. So the upshot was, and first she said, I'm too old. I said, no, you're not too old. And the RAF offered her a 5-year commission based at High Wycombe, at Headquarters Air, which suited her domestically. And she signed on the dotted line and signed the Official Secrets Act again for the second time, and rejoined, and has been extended and serving to age 60. So, you're not too old. And talking about that aging population, the armed forces very much value those skills. She was trained, it was, again, I think a win-win. So nice little story.
That's a fantastic example, and I think really, really thought-provoking your question as well, Rachel, because if we go back to some of the themes we've already covered today, one of them is the need to move at pace, the need to get things right more quickly. We have across defence, unfortunately, countless examples in recent years of major programmes slipping, incurring delays, and we know that those slips are really not tenable in the current climate. So how do we best bring some of that knowledge to bear, and could we, to your point, could we be bringing some of that experience into those key programs? Could we be asking them to critically challenge decisions that are being made, to provide some of that experience of what could go wrong, to a team that's maybe facing a challenge for the first time? I think that's a really good way of looking at it.
I mean, we do have, building on Wendy's example, I'm not going to beat Wendy's example, but yeah, as a sector, looking at some people that come out of the armed forces and move that into private sector. It's not everybody, but we are quite good at bringing some of that across. There is always typically, or stereotypically, it's like at the top of the tree when somebody senior retires from a uniform, you think, all right, which one are they going, where are they going to land? I wonder, you have a little pool and stuff to try and work it out. So we have that opportunity of bringing that expertise across an extent, but we don't do it throughout the rest of the ecosystem, do it, the rest of the hierarchy. Somebody that has spent even 2 years somewhere, whether it's in a prime that could take it over into the civil service, that's worked in a uniform that could take it over to somewhere else. We don't necessarily think of that. Our career paths aren't necessarily that clear in some places.
I'm just looking at Vicky's question in the chat. Yep. Do we need to look at education and girls, women going into STEM subjects? So again, go back to my former role as head of RAF recruitment, and we calculated that if nothing changed, it would take another 70 years for women to be appropriately represented in STEM roles in the UK. That's 3 generations, which clearly was going to be far too long. We also knew that young women do very well at GCSE level in science subjects. They then go on to do their A-levels and they drop the science subjects. Not all of them, but that's where it starts tailing off. And the reason for that is they can't see good careers. They can't see role models, examples of women who are successful in STEM subjects out in industry. So I think that's something that we need to work on, is promoting those successful women, and that's where women in defence is key as part of that. And I know all the great work that is going on, Rachel. I think we can do more with that, definitely.
Yeah, and just want to. Louise raised an interesting point as well in the chat about is there a danger that positive discrimination HR tick boxes create that initial, could have a short-term negative impact on the readiness, and that is the circle or the square we're trying to circle, or circle we're trying to square, isn't it? But is there more, going back to what we were saying about it, fix the women problem or the gender problem? Do we now need to be a bit more obstinate going into a meeting and saying, well, why am I the only woman here? Do we need to be challenged more, not going to an event or objecting to something that our organisations may be sponsoring, supporting, or hosting, that is either an all-female or an all-male panel? Do we need, are some of those soft things embedding those behaviours that we can say we should have moved on from this? I've been in a meeting where there's been more people called Paul than there were women in the room. More people in striped shirts than there were women in the room. And that isn't way back in my career. That's in the last 5 years. So is that where we can start as individuals? We need to start embedding that behaviour at base level. This is not a diverse room.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go on, Catherine. No, you go.
I think that is important to do. I think to the point Louise is raising, though, that there is a need to make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that we need certain critical skills, and we always should be appointing the best candidate for a role, no matter who that candidate is. I think culturally, the piece that I think we can challenge and start challenging quite effectively is in some of that longer term resource planning, and that doesn't need to be many years out in the future. That can be 3 years, 5 years, making sure that we are ensuring there are good candidates being considered, and that we're not just accepting the first shortlist of candidates that we see. If we don't see that diversity that we hoped we might do in a shortlist of candidates, pushing back on our recruitment partners, for example, to say that we want to see more CVs before we make our final decision on shortlist of who we might interview. I think it's those types of changes that may feel like they take an extra hour or an extra 2 hours in a day, but it's those types of actions that will start to see the really long-term shift. But sorry, Wendy, back to you.
No, I fully agree with all of that, Catherine. I just want to be clear on positive discrimination. That's illegal. Positive action is legal. And positive action is what you're talking about, Rachel. It's about being upfront where you see underrepresentation, whatever type of minority group or underrepresented group we're talking about. And it comes back to the point of that's how you access more talent. It's about cognitive diversity. It's not about getting more women, more ethnic minorities, more disabled people, whatever group we're talking about. It's about accessing the broadest possible pool of talent, because that's where we get our operating capability from. So if we're not seeing that, then we need to take positive action to ensure that we are doing more to attract and recruit a broader group of people. It's cognitive diversity that counts.
I'm going to just a random little moment, because we are challenged at the moment when it comes to anything inclusion, diversity. There's quite a significant noise about it at the moment. If any of you, so I think everyone here probably knows about what critical mass that Women in Defence looks at, what the science is behind that. There is also this thing called the subcritical mass, which is where before the change happens, there's the massive reaction. So that's what I like to think that's what we haven't seen at the moment, and we're moving towards it. But the other day, I had a survey for having used a Sainsbury's or something like that. Win 100,000 extra nectar points. All this. So I went through it, and it took about 2 minutes to give my review on whatever I'd done. It then took 4 minutes to go through the diversity questions. For a survey that was potentially going to put me into a draw for it, what did it matter? The fact that I was able to get my bread really easily and it was fresh. What does it matter about all those diversity questions? And I think this is there's some serious that's where I think we're part of what we work against, isn't it? So it's that those little shifts are what going to make the big difference against some of those other silly things.
I think that's probably as much about understanding the customer base as it is about anything else, so they can target you more effectively to sell more products.
See, Wendy, I'm a marketing person. I don't have many loyalty cards because I know how they use my data, and I like mixing up. Right, we're getting near towards the end. Some great chat going on as well. So let's try and be optimistic. What is there to give you optimism, or do you have any optimism about this? And if we were to be having this conversation in 5 years, or do you think we'll be having this same conversation in 5 years? Or would we be saying, look at what we've achieved? What would that success look like for either of you? And I'm going to start with Wendy. Sorry, no, I said Wendy, and I was looking at Catherine. Let's start with Catherine.
Okay, so there's a lot that makes me optimistic. I think I do believe we've moved away through it from a period of using sort of taglines around diversity and inclusion to actually the organisations that are really focusing on those areas are doing so meaningfully. So that gives me a huge degree of optimism. I think a lot of examples. So I have the honour of getting to be one of the early stage judges for the Most Improved Charter Signatory Award for Women in Defence Charter, and what I've seen through the years of judging that award is the shifts and the real effort being made by organisations and by our services and by the civil service to really truly turn the tide a little bit in terms of how we are preparing people and bringing people into the organisations. So for me, a lot of really positive green signs and true progress. In terms of what success for me would look like in 5 years' time, I'm not naive. I don't think it's going to be measured necessarily in terms of huge proportions of representation, but I do think it's going to be around having a more resilient and truly capable ecosystem that is accessing good skills. And I just to go back to the point around STEM joiners and keeping a wider proportion of our population in STEM subjects. If there is a change in the discourse with our teachers and our academic staff at school age, I would love to see that over the next 5 years as well.
Yeah.
I think for me, if I look at the changes that the armed forces have seen in the last 35 years, and at the time when I joined and the roles that weren't open to women, we now have all roles open to everyone. There is nothing apart from Roman Catholic priest that women can't do in the armed forces. We have flexible service legislation embedded, which says that those statutory flexible working arrangements that allow people to serve part-time and have a better work-life balance, meet their domestic commitments. We've removed a number of residency rules for Commonwealth personnel, so dropping the 5-year UK residency requirement for Commonwealth recruits, which is again has broadened our recruiting pool, and we've overhauled the complaints and justice system, so making the independent specialist tri-service team handling grievances around bullying, harassment, discrimination, so taking that outside the traditional chain of command. So a huge amount of progress. We still have more work to do, and again, this is not just about the military, it's about the defence sector more broadly, but I am optimistic about the future when I see the progress that's been made in the last 30 years. I think the next 30 years it's a really exciting time, accessing new technology into cyber, into space, the opportunities that are available for young people now joining the defence sector. It's huge. So yeah, I'm really optimistic about the future.
Thank you. Right, just sort of looking at it, Vicky, about talking about the capturing the data. I think that's one of the things that is going to become, that's what I think we're going to see as a change in the next 5 years. I think as the charter, Defence Charter, already collects data on an annual basis. Little plug, that will be coming out, the report's due out week commencing the 8th of September, so please look out for that. We'll see how we've done. But there is the use of data to be able to evidence things differently and make things better. At the moment, to your point, Mandy, we hear a lot about the fact that we've improved or improving the way in which we deal with grievances and complaints is so good and much needed, but it highlights the negative. So and there wasn't the last year or the year before, something was measured for the first time. That was measured, and it was, well, look at the full state of it. Yeah, but now we can see it, so we can address it. And I think that's where we are with more things. And I would hope that in 5 years we're having this discussion, we're able to all rattle out stats far much more easier, or we've got more of those evidence points, so we can the shift. To your point, Catherine, it's not going to be a massive shift overnight. We've all talked about the little bits, but actually we can see that they are happening, and we can see them incrementally building and changing that response, whether that is hard evidence, whether it's the anecdotal stuff, or whether it's just the way things feel. I think would be a significant thing. That's what I'm optimistic about. And I've been in many conversations over the last couple of months where we're finding these little pools of data, and you've got the power, if we start to bring that together, to be able to see where it is, and to be able to feed that in to help people, help people to be able to actually address where some of the problems are. Wendy, Catherine, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciated. And thank you everybody for the comments, the conversation you've been having going in the chat. It has been fantastic. We may be a perfectly small formed group, but that's not going to stop us doing these types of events. They are really powerful to be able to start to build relationships and be able to talk about things that are going on out there. As I mentioned, there's another session tomorrow, which I think is at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, which is on the building future defence workforce, which is to explore why people capability is fundamental to defence readiness and how attracting, developing and retaining the right workforce underpins operational capacity. It's going to move beyond talk about inclusion and instead look at how workforce capability contributes to national security, resilience and readiness. So you can see that natural flow from today, where we've been talking about readiness. This is getting deeper into the conversation so Louise Spate is going to be, who's on this call, is going to be facilitating that tomorrow, joined by Aidan Wood from Match Tech and Shah Davis from AWE. So that will be a great session as well. If you want to join that and haven't already, please just drop an email or something to whichever Women in Defence email address that sent you the link. Ask them, because I know we've closed the Eventbrite, so please ask them. And then keep an eye out for any write-up off the back of this and the social posts that we put up there, because it's really important to be able to keep these discussions going. Thanks very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed
Bye.
it. Thanks, Catherine. Bye-bye. Bye.